Old 18. Okay. SSH auth credentials. 360 degree keep open. Yes. Good. Yeah, nice. So whenever my work is done, right, that then only after that I am just deleting my cluster. 1 second. Nice. Below. So this is the billing is total forecasted cost for the current month, $3. Last month the total cost $3.7. So this is the cost, guys. So you can check it in the billings. Okay. So EKS is not a return eligible. So that will take the bill, guys. Okay. EC2. Checking guys, yesterday we rebooted this batch 54. So this is the one. Satish joined.
Yeah, I joined, bro.
Mm,
Sorry for the late today.
no problem. Yeah. So yesterday we discussed about the pod, right, guys? Yeah. I will tell you one thing. So actually, yeah. So this is the Docker container. So Docker, this is the EC2 instance. This is the container. So container, so we cannot expose right directly. So we can expose through EC2 instance. So we can expose to the EC2 instance, right, outside. So same like as a Kubernetes. So this is the Kubernetes worker node. So this worker node contains a pod. A pod contains the containers. A pod contains the containers. Okay. So a pod having the IP address, pod getting the IP address. So IP address. So something like by default the pod will not expose outside. So for example, so we have only one container. We have only one container. In this container, so deployed, for example, Tomcat, deployed Tomcat. For example, Tomcat web server. So by default nature, pod by default nature, so it will not expose to the outside of the network. So if someone is accessing this website, if someone is accessing this website, so it will not expose outside of the network. So pod default nature is, so it will not expose the outside of the network. So if I'm able to access the website, it can't access because of the pod itself doesn't have a exposed to outside of the network. So how we can outside something like a, so it will not expose, but okay, so something like this is two pods. So this is another pod. So this pods contains a database. This pod contain a database, something like pod default nature is it will communicate. So it will communicate within the cluster. So this is the cluster, right? This is the worker node. So within the worker node, it will communicate. How it will communicate? It will communicate through pod default nature is it will not expose the outside of the network. It will expose the inside of the network. How it will expose? It will expose through, what is that? Cluster IP. So through cluster IP. So cluster IP means it will expose inside of the network, inside of the cluster. It will not expose outside of the cluster. Okay. I want to expose to outside. So we need to use the service concept. What is the concept, guys? Service. Kubernetes service concept. Service concept. So in this service concept, we have a three types of services. One is cluster IP. Second one is NodePort. So third one is load balancer. What is that? Load balancer. Now you understood? So cluster IP, now you understood. It will expose inside the network. Okay, node port. It will expose. So it will expose outside of the network. Load balancer means you have a number of containers, number of pods, right? For example, so we have a number of pods. So we have a one pod. So we can use the node port. So we have a number of pods are running for the one application. So for that time, what we need to use? So we need to use the load balancer. We need to use the load balancer concept. Okay. So it will expose all the pods by using the load balancer. So if only one, so we can use the node port. Node port. We have multiple pods. We have multiple pods and use load balancer. Okay, load balancer. So this is inside the cluster over here. So if you want to communicate between the app server and DB server, so we can use the cluster IP. Yes, now you understood? Guys, understood or no?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, bro.
Yes, right? Very good.
Inside the cluster.
Inside the cluster only. Or something like you say understood. So the pod to pod. So we don't want so the database application whenever the people communicated the application. So for example, this guy connected to the application. So signed up the account. So we want to store the data. So how we can store the data? We can store the data in the database. So how it will connect? It will connect from local inside the cluster. Okay, and the pod will connect to the another pod. So within the database, so and the app to database, the data will be transferred to the by using the cluster IP. Okay, ClusterIP service. So if you want to access this pod, so this is the node port. So so we have a multiple pods. So you can use the load balancer. Guys, understood?
Now coming in, bro, once again, last line you told, right? If we have
Which
multiple,
pods?
okay,
So this is multiple pods. Okay.
okay,
So your application will be deployed under the multiple pods. Okay.
yes.
So in one pod, we can use the node pod. So if multiple pods, your application will be deployed under the multiple pods. So how we can connect this? So you can connect this by using load balancer.
Yeah, okay.
Understood?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is
Multiple pods and different servers, right?
different servers.
Yes.
Means
Uh, Different servers in the sense they are not belong to same node, multiple nodes, I mean.
that one also it will eligible. So you said right. So we have a two worker nodes. Okay. That one pod is created here. Another pod is created here.
Yes.
Another pod is created here. Another pod created here. Yes. So we can use the load balancer and we can communicate with this. You're asking this one, right?
Yes, correct.
It will also work. Yeah. Kubernetes service. Kubernetes service is used to expose pods outside cluster. Okay. We have three types of Kubernetes services. So we have a three types of services. What are those, guys? Tell me, guys. What are the types of services?
ClusterIP, NodePort,
Hmm.
load balancer.
Very good. Hmm. Time నిద్రపోతాను.
I said load balancer, sir.
Okay. cluster IP,
NodePort
NodePort
LoadBalancer.
load balance. Right.
Yes.
We need to write the service manifest aml to expose parts. Okay. So we have created a manifest file for the pod. Okay. What is this? So API version, find metadata spec. Here, so here kind equal to pod. If you want to create the manifest file for the service, kind is a service. Okay. So kind is a service. So what is that? Take this one. So what is this, guys? Kind is a
Pod service.
service. Okay. Name metadata. Metadata name. Tomcat SVC service. Okay. Spec. So here this is not a pod, right? Here it will change the name spec type, guys, not container spec type. What is the spec type, guys? Node port, cluster IP, and the load balancer. So type equal to node port, load balancer. Okay. At cluster IP. Cluster IP by default nature, right? No need to create a service file for the cluster IP. Node port, load balancer. Type equal to node port or load balancer. Node port. N caps, P caps. Okay. So here, so we need to provide the selector. Selector means, so for this node port, so in which pod we need to use. So the selector is nothing but the label, pod label. So label and selector. Guys, so whatever the label we write here, right, it will be used for the selector. So it will be used for the selector. Okay. What is that? Type of port to node port to. Then you can use you can write the selector. What is that? Selector. So selector equal to app. Selector app. What is the label, guys, here? Tomcat app. So in which pod we need to expose this node port? So it is depending upon the selector. So which pod, guys? Tomcat app pod. Tomcat app pod we need to expose it. So we need to expose it. Guys, understood? What is this? This is the pod label. Why we write the label here? Because of if you want to select so if you want to use the service for the selector, so for that purpose you use the label. Okay. So then ports. Okay. Selector app, right? App ports. So what is the port? So I want to expose the port. So here we need to use the ports. So then which port I want to expose? I want to expose as a port 80. expose at a port 80 under target port. So here, what is that? Target port. Target port equal to 8080. Okay, this is the service file. Service YAML. What this is? Service.yaml. Service.yaml. Guys, understood?
Yes, bro.
So we have created pod.yaml yesterday, and pod is running, right? Pod is running now. So we are creating a service file. So service file to expose this pod. To expose this pod, right? Yes. Yeah. Ubuntu kubectl get pod. Kubectl get pods. There is no pods. So I want to create the pod, guys. Kubernetes. Yeah. Pod.yaml. So this is the pod.yaml. Yeah. Pod.yaml. Pod.yaml is there. Okay. So how we can apply the pod, guys? Kubectl
Apply
apply.
name,
Hyphen F.
YAML file name.
Pod.yaml. Pod is created. How to check? Kubectl.
Get pods.
Pod is running. Okay. Pod is up and running, but it will not expose because of by default nature is
Not to expose.
cluster IP. Cluster IP by default nature is cluster port. It will not expose. Right. So we want to expose it. Again, we need to create the svc.yaml. Oh, so this is the svc. Yeah. API. So kind equal to service metadata name my tomcat spec type NodePort selector app my tomcat port so port 80 target port 8080. Okay. WQ cat svc.yaml cat pod.yaml. Okay. So what is the name of the label? My tomcat 9. So what is the selector name? My tomcat 9. Okay. Now let's check kubectl get svc. SVC means so service. Okay. So we just apply the pod.new. It will not apply the service.new. So what type of Kubernetes IP? So this is the SVC. So this is the default. By default name picture Kubernetes is cluster IP. Okay. So I want to apply this kubectl apply hyphen f. What is that? SVC dot I'm applying service manifest file. So service my tomcat is created. Okay. kubectl get svc. You see, my Tomcat is exposed to NodePort and the cluster IP is 10.100.226.25. So it is targeted 80. It is targeted 80 port number. Okay, let's see what is the public IP address. Um, hmm. So how you can check it in which node it will be, in which node we can be, in which node it will be created, the pod will be created. kubectl get pods -o wide wide. My Tomcat 9 running. So 31. So what is the IP address of this pod? So 192.168.40.2.1 and the node is 62. Node is 62. And check the yeah. So here, what is the public IP address? http:// ATM. Yeah. So we need to enable the security, right? For here. Topic all outbound rules, all inbound, all topic on. All fine topic. Is not shit. Target port 80, right? Yes, we see 3075. Yeah, guys, this is the IP address. Lab 6 is. Yeah, guys, understood? So we need to enable the security group in the all something like, or else we can use the IP address node port, IP address node port. Okay, hello, is able to understand?
Yeah, bro. Yeah.
Understood? So before it will not expose now. So we are able to expose. This is the website. So the container, the pod is exposed. Inside the pod, there is a container. Container will expose it. I understood. So that is nothing but a service. Yeah. Note. What is the note? We can see service information and node port number assigned by Kubernetes. Okay. Another note, enable node port number in security group of worker node, security group of worker node, which our pod is running. So in the which node our pod is running, guys? In the worker node, which our pod is running. Yes, understood. How to access the application. Access application in browser. So what is that, guys? So URL http:// node worker node public IP node port number / application lab 6A. So this is the way we can access the port. Guys, now you understood? So if you want to use the load balancer, if I use the load balancer is not created. It will create the load balancer, then we can access that load balancer. Okay, guys, guys understood? Huh? Guys, speak out, guys. Satish, Prem,
Yes.
Magna, right? So now you understood. So what you guys can try with the NodePod instead of NodePod, you can try with the ClusterIP. Okay. I want to add both are in the same. How we can add it? So I will tell you. So as of now, what is the so what we did, guys, as of now? Working procedure. Working procedure. So what we did as of now? write a pod manifest YAML file. Guys, you understood how to write a manifest file? Create pod using kubectl apply command. Guys, are you able to create the pod by using pod manifest file? Check pod details and pod logs and in which worker node, worker node, in which worker node our pod is running. Understood, right, guys? So the fourth one is write write service manifest YAML file. Now you understood how to write the service manifest YAML file. So what is the fifth one? Fifth one, create service to expose pods. So create a service, expose the pods, right? So what is the sixth one? Check service details and node port number assigned by Kubernetes, right? The seventh one is enable node port number in worker node security group. Worker node security group. Access application using worker node IP. Access application using worker node IP. Guys, understood as of now? Guys,
Checking,
yes,
bro.
yes, right? So write a pod manifest file, create a pod using the kubectl apply, check pod details and pod logs in which worker node pod is running, write a service manifest file, create a service to expose the pods, check the service details and node port number assigned by the Kubernetes, enable node port number in the worker node security group, access application using the worker node IP. Yes, understood? Yes. As of now you understood the service and the pod, right? So now you understood the node port and load balance. So what is a cluster IP? What is a cluster IP? So when we create pods, every pod will get a unique IP address. Okay. So we can access pod inside the cluster using its IP address. What is that? We can access pod inside cluster using its IP address. Its IP address. So, what is a node, guys? Note pods are short-lived objects, right, guys? Pods are short-lived objects. When we do the deployment, another deployment, the pods will recreate or a rolling update, right? It will it will delete the pods. Pods are short-lived objects. So when pod is recreated, it's what is that, guys? It's IP will IP will be changed. IP will be changed. So we cannot depend on pod IP address, right? Pod IP to access because of, so it's a short-lived object. Pod will delete once we deploy or something, like if you're having any issue, CPU memory issue, right? Pod will be recreate. So whenever a pod recreated, right, it will change the IP address. So we cannot depend on the pod IP address to access it, right? To expose to
సార్
expose, yeah.
మనం పాడైపోతే బ్రౌజర్ లో అప్లికేషన్ ని యాక్సెస్ చేసేది.
పాడ్ ఐపీతో చేస్తే ఏమవుతుంది? పాడ్ ఐపీ డోకర్ కంటైనర్ లో నేర్చుకున్నావు కదా. కంటైనర్. సో దిస్ ఇస్ ద ఈసీటీ ఇన్స్టెన్స్. సో దిస్ ఇస్ ద డోకర్ కంటైనర్. ఓకే. సో డోకర్ కంటైనర్ ఐపీ అడ్రస్. సో డోకర్ కంటైనర్ ఐపీ అడ్రస్ అండ్ డోకర్ కంటైనర్ పోర్ట్ map to the EC2 instance. EC2 instance is nothing but a worker node. So we can access the applications through the EC2 instance public IP only. EC2 instance public IP only. So we are getting the IP address, but that IP address and that port number is mapped to the worker node. That mapped to the worker node only. Okay. సో కంటైనర్ కానీ పాడ్ ఐపీ అడ్రస్ ద్వారా మనం యాక్సెస్ చేయలేము. ఎందుకు? సో మన EC2 ఇన్స్టెన్స్ దాటుకొని రావాలి కదా ఇది. సో అందుకనే, సో ఇది యాక్సెస్ కావాలంటే అందుకనే దీనికి మ్యాప్ చేస్తాను. సో మనం రన్ చేసిన కమాండ్ docker run -d
మరి
-p 8080. ఇది కంటైనర్ది. సో ఇది కంటైనర్ది, ఇది EC2 ఇన్స్టెన్స్ ఇది.
కంటైనర్ ది ఊరికే మారిపోతూ ఉంటుంది సార్.
ఊరికే మారిపోయి అడ్రస్ అనేది. ఇప్పుడు ఇక్కడ ఏం చేసాము? సో క్యూబర్నెటీస్ లో పాడ్ లో కంటైనర్ క్రియేట్ అవుతుంది. ఓకే. సో ఈ పాడ్ అనేది ఊకే ఎందుకు డిలీట్, కంటైనర్ డిలీట్ అవుతుందంటే పాడ్ ఆటోమేటిక్ గా డిలీట్ అయిపోద్ది. సో పాడ్ కి ఐపీ అడ్రస్ ఉంటది, బట్ పాడ్ ఈజ్ ఏ షార్ట్ లివ్డ్ ఆబ్జెక్ట్. ఇట్ విల్ డిలీట్ ద పాడ్ whenever you deploy, right? So we cannot expose this pod to outside. So we cannot access pod inside the cluster using IP address. We can access, and so pods are short-lived objects. When pod is recreated, its IP address will be changed. So we cannot depend on the pod IP address to access. Okay.
పార్ట్స్ ఉన్నాయి అనుకో సార్, ఒక నోడ్ లో
Pod ఉంది.
2-3 పార్ట్స్ ఉంటే అప్పుడే సార్ ఇప్పుడు కూడా మనం ఓన్లీ వర్కర్ నోడ్ ఐపీతోనే యాక్సెస్ అయిపోతుంది సార్.
3 pods ఉన్నాయి అన్న. అండర్స్టూడ్.
ఎస్ సార్.
3 pods ఉన్నాయి. సో ఈ 3 pods కూడా వర్కర్ నోడ్ ఐపీతోనే ఎలా? సో లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ ఉపయోగిస్తాం. ఓకే. సో లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తావు. ఇప్పుడేమో ఇది త్రూ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్స్ ద్వారా వీ కెన్ కమ్యూనికేట్. ఈ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్కి ఏమవుతుంది? నీ EC2 ఇన్స్టెన్స్ అనేది, సో ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఒక లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ క్రియేట్ అవుతుంది. సో ఈ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ ద్వారా నీ EC2 ఇన్స్టెన్స్ ఏమవుతుంది? ఈ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ కి యాక్సెస్ అవుతుంది. సో త్రూ ఈ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్స్ ద్వారా నువ్వేం చేస్తావు? ఈ ఈ ఐ- మ్, ఈ పార్ట్స్ ని కనెక్ట్ అవుతుంది. సో
అప్పుడు కూడా
ఇదర్
నోడ్ ఐపీతోనే కనెక్ట్ అవుతుంది సార్.
ఇప్పుడు లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ విన్నావా నువ్వు కాన్సెప్ట్? సో లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ కాన్సెప్ట్ ఏంటంటే ఈ 3 EC2 ఇన్స్టెన్సెస్. ఓకే. సో ఈ 3 EC2 ఇన్స్టెన్సెస్ లో అప్లికేషన్ ఉంది. సో నీ అప్లికేషన్ ఏం చేసావంటే నీ ఇన్స్టెన్సెస్ ఏం చేసావంటే ఈ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ కి అటాచ్ చేసావు. ఓకే. సో ఈ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ కి ఒక URL ఉంటుంది. ఈ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ URL క్లిక్ చేయగానే బేస్డ్ ఆన్ ద ట్రాఫిక్ ని బట్టి ఇక్కడికి వెళ్ళాలా, ఇక్కడికి వెళ్ళాలా అని చూస్తుంది. నీ అప్లికేషన్ ఈ మూడిట్లో డిప్లాయ్ చేసావు. ఓకే. ప్రేమ్,
సార్ ఇప్పుడు
నేను ఒక వీడియో
ఇవన్నీ
పంపుతాను చూడు, అది లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ వీడియో, నీకు అర్థమవుతుంది. ఉమ్,
ఇప్పుడు ఇవి ఇన్స్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ పార్ట్స్ సార్ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్స్ కనెక్ట్ అని.
సో లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సర్ కనెక్ట్ అయిన ఇన్స్టెన్సెస్.
ఓకే.
ఓకేనా? నీకు ఒక వీడియో పంపుతాను, అది చూడు. టు ఎక్స్పోజ్ పాడ్ యాక్సెసెస్ within the cluster, we can use cluster IP. So to expose the pods access within the cluster, we can use the cluster IP services. Okay. Cluster IP will generate one IP addresses to access our pods within the cluster. Okay. Cluster IP will generate one IP address to access our pods. So within the cluster. So within the cluster, note cluster IP will not change. Will not change when pods are recreated. Okay, the cluster IP will not change when the pods are recreated. If it is a node pod, definitely it will change the IP address. It will change the IP address. Cluster IP will not change when the pods are recreated. So what is that? So this is the service.yml, right? Now you can write the cluster. You can write the cluster. So service metadata suspect node port. Instead of node port, we can use cluster IP. So we can use cluster IP. You understood? What is a node port? So node port we already discussed, right? Node port. So what is a node port? Node port service is used to expose the ports outside the cluster also. So is used to expose ports outside cluster also. Outside cluster also. So when we use node port, when we use node port service, so we can specify node port number in service manifest file. So when we use node port service, we can specify the node port number in service manifest file. If we don't specify if you don't specify node port number then Kubernetes will assign a random node port number for our service. Node port number for our service. Right? So node port range. What is that? Node port range from 30,000 to 32,767. Okay. So node port number is 30,000 to 32,767. So, okay. Now you understood. So we will create a service manifest file and pod manifest file in different mammal files. I want to combined manifest file for pod and service. How we can command manifest file for pod and service? Okay, combined manifest file for pod and service. How to combine the manifest file for pod and service? How to combine, guys? So what is this? This is the, or else I will take here. What is this? This is the, what this is? This is a pod manifest file. This is a pod manifest file. Okay. So whatever you are saying dot, right? So dot means the manifest end of the manifest file. So I don't want to use this dot. And again you can use the three hyphens. In last we can use the dot. Okay. Yeah. Now you understood? So something like API version, hyphen version, and this is another manifest file, hyphen, and finally we use the dot for end for the file. End for the file. Yes, understood? Yeah. So this is the combined the manifest file. So what we can call it as pod svc.aml. Okay. So we can create this as pod svc.aml. So we can create so pods. Understood? Duplicate sessions. Ubuntu. Okay. So vi pod svc.aml. Pod svc.aml. So what is that pod svc, guys? So this is the one. Yeah.
Load balancer in the place of NodePort, we need to write
Hmm.
load balancer, sir.
Hmm. అక్కడ చూపిస్తాను.
Uh,
Yeah. So we combined the pod file and a service YAML file. Okay. WQ. What is this? What is this? Pod svc.aml. So I want to delete the pod and the I want to delete the pod and I want to delete the node. How you can pod and the svc. So delete all Kubernetes components we have created. What is the command? kubectl. Kubectl delete all hyphen all. It will delete everything. So it will delete the pod, it will delete the service. Delete the pod and delete the service. Okay. kubectl, kubectl get pods, kubectl get svc. Okay. The Tomcat 9 is not available. So now you can apply kubectl apply hyphen f pod svc dot ramming. You see? So within the one pod svc.aml, it will create the pod and service. It will create the pod and the service. So kubectl get pods hyphen o wide. Okay. So it will create under the 62 node only. Okay. Get svc. Three zero six double two. 622. Okay, so it is accessed. It is accessed. So we created the SVC and pod and SVC in the same AML file. Same AML file. Guys, understood? Okay. Yeah. Delete all K8s components we have created. How you can delete, guys? You can delete by using kubectl up kubectl delete all all. Okay. So then apply manifest file. How to apply a manifest AML? Guys, how to apply a manifest AML? What is the command? Frame. How to create the pod and service? Which command we need to apply? Frame. Satish. Magna. Siri.
kubectl
kubectl
apply
apply hyphen
hyphen
m
f
manifest AML. What is the example? kubectl apply hyphen f pod svc dot AML. Okay. Get the pods. How you can get the pods? What is the command?
kubectl get pods.
Yes, kubectl get pods. Very good. How to get the service? kubectl get svc. Okay. And check pod running in which node? How to check the pod running in which node? kubectl get pods hyphen o wide. Understood? Hyphen o wide. Then access application in browser. How to access application in browser? So make sure node port number enabled in security group. Then only it will expose, guys. Okay. What is it? URL. So URL. What is the URL? HTTP colon double slash node public IP node public IP node port number slash lab 6A lab 6A. Yes, understood? Yeah. So now we understood the Kubernetes components. We understood the Kubernetes components pod services. Now we understood the pod and services. Guys, understood? What is a pod? How you can create the manifest file? Okay. So how you can create the manifest file? So you can create the manifest file and the service file, how you can expose the outside of the network. So we discussed, right?
Yes, bro. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll discuss tomorrow, we'll discuss load balancer also. Okay. So tomorrow we'll discuss load balancer, then pod life cycle. Pod life cycle. Then what is that next component? Next component is
Namespaces.
namespaces. So we'll discuss namespace. namespaces, then replication controller. So daemon set, daemon set and deployment. Deployment is using in the real time. People are using deployment, replication set, so service. Okay. So I will show you. Config maps and secrets. What is a config maps and secret? So config map and secrets, or whatever the usernames and passwords. So I don't want to create the hard coded values, or the we can use it in the config map and secrets. How we can something like the config map secrets are different from the environment, dev environment, QA environment, and production environment. If you use the same manifest file in the dev, QA, and production, it will success or it will not success because of the usernames. Database usernames and passwords are different from environment to environment. So that time we can create a config map and secret. We can pass those that values. So ingress is nothing but the networking. Working will show. So Kubernetes volumes, Helm charts. So Helm charts is nothing but a package management. If you want to install the package and the Kubernetes that parts and containers, so we can use the Helm charts. So in Linux, how we can install the packages through yum, right? Yum is a package management. Helm also is a package management. Grafana and Prometheus. Grafana Prometheus is nothing but the log monitoring tools. So monitoring tools. ELK is nothing but a log. So we'll show you this one, guys. Okay. So before this, we need to deployment strategies also. The Kubernetes deployment strategies we'll discuss. Okay. So most probably we'll complete next week that Kubernetes. Mostly, if possible, we'll complete or otherwise. So it will go on the next week. Okay.
Okay, bro.
Yep. Yep. Thank you.